See that white SUV stuck up there? Yeah, the one perched about 4 feet off the ground, balanced in the fork of that old oak tree like some kind of confused, modern art masterpiece. That's Karen's Escalade. And no, a tornado didn't put it there, and neither did a flash flood. I did. I put it there with a 70-horsepower John Deere tractor, a little bit of physics, and a whole lot of patience. And the best part? I didn't break a single law doing it. In fact, according to the county sheriff who's standing right over there shaking his head, I might have actually done her a favor by keeping it out of the mud. But before I tell you how I turned a $90,000 luxury vehicle into the world's most expensive birdhouse, you need to understand that I'm not a guy who looks for trouble. I spent 25 years working logistics in Chicago, dealing with shipping containers, union disputes, and blood pressure that hovered somewhere between stroke and heart attack. So when I finally cashed out my 401k and bought these 80 acres of timber and cornfield in rural Nebraska, I was looking for exactly one thing: silence. I wanted to wake up and hear nothing but the wind in the corn stalks and the occasional complaint from a cow. I didn't want neighbors, I didn't want meetings, and I sure as hell didn't want to deal with a homeowners association. That's why I bought this specific parcel. It's an island of agricultural zoning surrounded by a sea of development, completely independent, with a deed that goes back to 1920. But silence, I've learned, is a magnet for people who love the sound of their own voice. My trouble started on a Tuesday morning in early June, the kind of morning that feels like a gift: cool air, heavy dew, the sun just painting the tops of the silos gold. I was walking the perimeter of my south pasture, checking for breaks in the barbed wire, when I heard it: an engine purring, not the rattle of a farm truck, but the smooth, expensive hum of something that costs more than my first house. I rounded the bend of the gravel service road, my private service road, mind you, and there it was. A pristine, pearl-white Cadillac Escalade parked dead center across the lane, blocking the path completely. Sitting in the driver's seat was a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a factory that specializes in entitlement. Oversized sunglasses, hair highlighted to within an inch of its life, holding a phone up to her face like she was filming a documentary on her own greatness. I walked up to the window, boots crunching in the gravel, giving her plenty of time to notice me, but she didn't even turn her head. I tapped on the glass. She lowered it about 2 inches, letting out a blast of air conditioning that smelled like vanilla and new leather. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking at me, her eyes still glued to her phone screen. "Morning, ma'am," I said, keeping it polite. "You're parked on a private road. I need to get a tractor through here in about an hour, so I'm going to need you to move." She finally looked at me, lowering her sunglasses to the bridge of her nose to give me a look that suggested I was a smudge on her windshield. "I'm utilizing the 5G signal," she said, as if that explained everything. "The reception in the subdivision is terrible, and I have a very important live stream for the HOA board. I'll be done in, 45 minutes. "Ma'am," I said, my patience already starting to fray at the edges, "this isn't a cell tower parking lot. This is a working farm. You're trespassing." She let out a sigh that was long, dramatic, and entirely unearned. "Look," she said, "I'm Karen Salters, president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. The developer told us that this road has historical access usage for the community. So, technically, I have a right to be here. Now, please, you're ruining my lighting." And then the window went up. I stood there for a second, blinking. Historical access? There was no historical access. I had the deed in my safe. There wasn't an easement within 5 miles of this fence line. But instead of escalating, instead of pounding on the hood, I took a breath, walked back to the house, and let it slide. I figured everyone gets one mistake. That was my mistake. Because when you give a person like Karen an inch, she doesn't just take a mile. She annexes the whole territory. It became a pattern. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, like clockwork, she'd be there. Always in the same spot, right under the shade of my oldest oak tree, running her engine to keep the AC blasting, sipping iced coffee, conducting HOA business on my land because she didn't want to sit in her own driveway. I tried talking to her. I tried showing her the no trespassing signs. I even tried calling the non-emergency line. But by the time a deputy would show up, she'd be gone, leaving nothing but tire tracks and a lingering scent of entitlement. But the real turning point, the moment where this stopped being an annoyance and started being a war, happened 2 weeks later. It was a scorcher of a day, humid and heavy, the air thick enough to chew on. I was out on the tractor, heading back to the barn with the bucket raised, when I heard a horn blasting, long, aggressive bursts that echoed off the metal siding of the barn. I killed the engine and jumped down, running toward the pasture gate. My cattle were in a panic. I have a small herd of black Angus, and among them was a heifer, number 402, heavily pregnant and skittish on a good day. The horn was spooking them, driving them into a corner of the fencing. I saw Karen's Escalade parked right against the fence line, and she was leaning on the horn, waving her hand out the window at me to move my tractor because I was blocking her exit from my land. In the chaos, 402 scrambled, her hooves slipping in the mud by the water trough. She slammed her flank hard into the steel edge of the tank. I heard the sound, a sickening, wet thud, followed by a low, pained bellow that tore right through me. I ran to the heifer. She was limping bad, favoring her left rear leg, eyes wide with fear. I spun around and marched to the Escalade. "You hurt my animal," I shouted, pointing at the heifer. "Stop the damn honking." Karen rolled her window down, looking annoyed rather than apologetic. "Well, maybe you shouldn't have cows so close to the road if they're that jumpy. Move your tractor. I have a nail appointment." I stared at her. I looked at the heifer, groaning in the mud, and then I looked back at this woman who treated the world like her personal waiting room. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't a snap. It was a setting of gears, a cold resolve settling into place like concrete. "Get off my land," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And don't come back. Don't make this difficult," she sneered, backing up and driving around me, spraying gravel onto my boots. I called Dr. Patterson, the vet, immediately. He came out, examined 402, and gave me the bad news. Ligament damage, severe stress. She's at high risk for early labor, Marcus, he told me, shaking his head. "Keep a close eye on her. If she goes down in a storm or gets stressed again, you could lose the calf. Maybe both of them." I spent the next 3 nights sleeping in the barn, watching that heifer, boiling with a quiet rage. I went to my lawyer, Jim Sutton, a guy who's been practicing property law since the ink was wet on the Constitution. We pulled the maps. We pulled the county records. We confirmed it 100%. There was absolutely no easement. None. Karen was trespassing every single time she crossed the cattle guard. "You need to document it," Jim told me. "Photos, videos, logs. If we sue, we need a mountain of evidence." "I'm done suing, Jim," I said. "I need to stop her." The storm hit 4 days later. It was one of those Nebraska monsters, the sky turning a bruised purple, clouds stacking up like anvils, the wind whipping the corn flat against the earth. I was in the house when the barometer dropped, and I knew, just knew, that 402 was going into labor. Animals sensed the pressure change. I ran to the barn. She was down. She was groaning, thrashing in the straw. The calf was breached, coming backward. I needed to get her to the vet clinic, and I needed to do it now. I hooked up the livestock trailer in the pouring rain, mud soaking me to the bone, adrenaline pumping so hard my hands were shaking. I loaded her up. It took 20 minutes of coaxing and praying, and jumped in the truck. I floored it down the driveway, wipers slapping frantically against the windshield, lightning flashing like a strobe light. And there she was, the white Escalade, parked sideways across the road, hazards blinking, blocking the only exit. I slammed on the brakes, the trailer jackknifing slightly in the mud before straightening out. I laid on the horn. Nothing. I jumped out into the deluge, running to her window, pounding on the glass. "Move," I screamed over the thunder. "I have an emergency. I have a dying animal." The window cracked an inch. Karen was sitting there, seat reclined, phone in hand. "I'm not moving in this," she yelled back. "Look at that mud. I just got this detailed. I'm waiting for the rain to let up. My heifer is dying." I warned. "Move the car." "It's just a cow," she shrieked. "Stop being dramatic. I am not getting my tires dirty for your farm animals." And then she rolled up the window. She locked the doors. She turned up her radio. I stood there in the rain, water streaming off my face, looking at this woman who valued her clear coat more than a life. I realized then that there was no humanity in her to appeal to. I ran back to the trailer. I climbed inside with the heifer. I didn't have time to argue. I didn't have time to go around. I delivered that calf in the trailer, in the dark, while the storm raged outside and Karen sat 50 feet away playing Candy Crush. It was brutal. It was bloody. I had to turn the calf manually, fighting the contractions, fighting the panic. When that little black calf finally slid out, coughing and sputtering, alive, I collapsed in the straw, weeping from exhaustion and sheer, unadulterated fury. The next morning, the sun came up bright and innocent, like the world hadn't almost ended in my driveway. I walked out to the porch with my coffee. The Escalade was gone. She'd driven off once the rain stopped, leaving ruts in my road and a hole in my patience that could never be filled. That's when I decided. No more talking. No more lawyers. It was time for physics. She came back the next morning. Of course she did. Routine is the crutch of the arrogant. She pulled into the same spot, under the oak tree, looking for shade. But this time, she wasn't alone. She brought an entourage. A silver Lexus and a BMW pulled in behind her, fellow HOA board members, here to survey the boundary line. Or so she claimed when I walked up with my body camera blinking on my chest. "We are documenting your hostility," Karen announced, stepping out of her car, phone raised. "We are filing an injunction to formalize our access to this road." "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "And you're blocking a working farm road." "We're leaving my vehicle here," she declared, smirking at her friends. "As a placeholder, to ensure our access rights aren't infringed upon while we go to the courthouse. If you touch it, if you tow it, I will sue you for every acre you own. My dashcam is running, Marcus. It records everything." "You're abandoning your vehicle on private property?" I asked, just to get it on the record. "I am securing a legal asset," she corrected. "Don't touch it." And with that, she climbed into the BMW with her friend, and the little convoy drove off, leaving the white Escalade sitting there under the oak tree, gleaming in the sun. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought the threat of a lawsuit and the watchful eye of her dashcam would freeze me in place. She thought I was just a dumb farmer who wouldn't know how to handle a $90,000 hostage. She was wrong. I'm not just a farmer. I'm a logistics manager. I know how to move heavy objects safely, efficiently, and without causing a single scratch of damage. I walked back to the barn and fired up the John Deere 5075E. It's a utility tractor with a front-end loader, plenty of hydraulic muscle. I grabbed my gear. Not chains, never chains. Chains scratch. I grabbed wide, heavy-duty polyester recovery straps, the kind used to lift boats. Soft, strong, and gentle. I drove out to the tree. I inspected the Escalade. She was parked perfectly, her rear bumper just under the massive, horizontal fork of the oak tree, a limb as thick as a telephone pole that had survived a century of storms. I did the math in my head. The Escalade weighs about 6,000 pounds. The weight distribution is front-heavy because of the engine. If I lifted the rear, the front would pivot. I looked at the ground. The rain had carved a shallow, soft, muddy ditch right in front of her front tires. If I lifted the back, the nose would dip, and the front wheels would settle gently into that soft mud, locking the vehicle in place. I wrapped the soft straps around the rear axle, careful to thread them through the control arms so they wouldn't pinch any brake lines. I patted the contact points with old moving blankets. I hooked the loops to the bucket of my tractor. I climbed into the cab. I engaged the hydraulics. Slowly, gently, the straps pulled tight. The rear suspension of the Cadillac compressed. And then, with a soft groan of settling metal, the rear tires left the ground. 6 inches, 12 inches, 2 feet. I drove the tractor forward, inching the swaying rear end of the SUV until it was hovering directly over a large, flat tree stump. A stump I had cut flush years ago, perfect for a table, or in this case, a jack stand. I lowered the hydraulics. The rear differential settled onto the stump, cushioned by the straps. I unhooked the tractor, leaving the straps tied off to the tree limb above for stability. I stepped back to admire my work. The Escalade was suspended. The rear wheels were dangling 3 feet in the air. The front wheels were buried hub-deep in the mud ditch. The car was at a 45-degree angle, nose down, tail up. It was completely immobilized. It couldn't drive forward. It couldn't drive back. It was stranded. But here's the kicker. I hadn't damaged it. Not a scratch. Not a dent. I hadn't opened the doors. I hadn't touched the paint. I had simply rearranged its orientation relative to gravity. I went to bed that night, sleeping the sleep of the just. The next morning, the sun broke over the horizon, and right on cue, the silver Lexus came tearing up the driveway. Karen jumped out before it even stopped moving. The scream she let out when she saw her car was primal. It was the sound of a reality breaking. "What did you do?" she shrieked, running toward the hanging SUV. My car. My car is in a tree." "Morning, Karen," I said, leaning against the fence post, sipping my coffee. "Nice day, isn't it? You monster. You destroyed it. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the FBI." "Go ahead," I said. "I already called the sheriff. He's on his way." Deputy Trujillo rolled up a few minutes later. He's a good man. Seen it all, or so he thought. He got out of his cruiser, took off his hat, and just stared at the Escalade for a solid minute. He looked at the straps. He looked at the stump. He looked at the mud. "Well," Trujillo said, rubbing his jaw, "that's a new one. Arrest him." Karen screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "That's vandalism. That's destruction of property. Look at it." Trujillo walked over to the SUV. He walked around it. He peered underneath. He checked the bumper. "Ma'am," he said, turning back to her, "I don't see any damage. The car isn't touching the tree. It's sitting on a stump. The straps are padded. There's no glass broken. Seems like it's just parked really aggressively." "It's hanging in the air," she wailed. "You abandoned the vehicle on private property, ma'am," Trujillo said, his voice hardening. "Mr. Chun here has the right to move obstructions. And looking at this, well, he moved it. He didn't wreck it. Can you drive it away?" "No. The wheels are off the ground." "Then you better call a tow truck," Trujillo said, putting his hat back on. "And ma'am, I'm writing you a citation for trespassing, and another one for blocking an emergency access route during a storm." I saw the report from the vet. Karen turned purple. She sputtered. She threatened to have his badge, but Trujillo just handed her the ticket and drove off. She stood there, impotent, staring at her beloved status symbol dangling like a piñata. She had to call a specialized crane service to get it down because a regular tow truck couldn't get the angle without dragging the bumper off. It cost her $1,500 just to get the car back on flat ground. But she wasn't done. Oh no, the humiliation was too much. That night, she went to social media. She posted a video on TikTok, sobbing, claiming the crazy farmer had attacked her, hijacked her car, and held her hostage. She edited the footage to make it look like I was screaming at her. She titled it "Attacked by a Psycho, Justice for Karen." It blew up. Millions of views. People were doxing me, threatening to burn down my farm, calling for my arrest. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the comments roll in, and I didn't panic. I just waited. I waited until the peak of the outrage, and then I uploaded my own video. I titled it "The Full Story." I uploaded the body cam footage of her blocking the road during the storm. The sound of the heifer groaning. Her shouting, "It's just a cow," through the window. I uploaded the footage of her abandoning the car, saying, "I'm leaving it here." And then I uploaded the drone footage of the lift, smooth, professional, careful. The internet flipped so fast, it gave everyone whiplash. Within an hour, #TeamFarmer was trending. People were tearing her apart. They saw the selfishness. They saw the cruelty to the animal. They saw the entitlement. But the final nail in the coffin didn't come from TikTok. It came from her own board. See, one of the people in that SUV with her, the guy in the golf shirt, was the HOA treasurer. And when he saw the backlash, when he saw the potential lawsuits heading their way, he panicked. He sent me an email. Subject, whistleblower. Attached were files. Receipts. It turns out, Karen wasn't just mean, she was a thief. She had been using HOA funds to pay for her car payments, her business lunches, and even the gas she used to trespass on my land. I printed it all out. I put it in a binder. The court date was 2 weeks later. Karen walked in with a new lawyer, looking confident, ready to sue me for emotional distress. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Harper, listened to Karen's sob story. Then she turned to me. "Mr. Chun, anything to add?" I handed over the binder. I handed over the thumb drive with the videos. Judge Harper watched the storm footage. Her face went hard. She looked at the financial records. Her eyes narrowed. "Ms. Salters," the judge said, her voice like a gavel strike. "Not only is this case dismissed with prejudice, but I am also issuing a restraining order barring you from coming within 500 feet of Mr. Chin's property. Furthermore, based on these financial documents, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into embezzlement and fraud." Karen fainted. Actually fainted. Hit the floor right there in the courtroom. 6 months later, the farm is quiet again. The heifer, 402, made a full recovery, and her calf, a little bull I named Storm, is growing big and strong. Karen is currently serving 18 months of house arrest. Ironically, in a different neighborhood because she had to sell her house to pay the legal fees and restitution to the HOA. I still have the stump out there. I drive past it every day. Sometimes, when the light hits it right, I can still see the tire marks in the mud, a reminder of the time gravity and patience won the war. It's funny. People think owning land is about fences and deeds. But really, it's about knowing where you stand. It's about knowing that no matter how loud someone honks, or how expensive their car is, the earth doesn't move for anyone. You have to move with it. And if you refuse to move, well, sometimes you end up in a tree. So, I've got to ask, have you ever had to teach someone a lesson in physics? Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who just wouldn't take a hint? Let me know in the comments. I read them all while I'm drinking my coffee on the porch. And if you're ever in Nebraska and see a white SUV hanging from an oak tree, just keep driving. It's there for a reason. Stay safe out there, folks. And don't block the road.